There is a smell in this room that you will carry with you for the rest of your life. Damp stone, straw that has not been changed in weeks, the iron of the chain around your ankle, which has a particular smell, cold and faintly sweet, the way old metal smells when it has been worn against skin for a long time. You are 19 years old. You have led armies. You have stood in the cathedral of Reims while a crown was placed on the head of the King of France, and the light came through the windows in long colored columns, and the sound of the crowd was so loud it ceased to be sound and became something else, a pressure, a warmth, a thing you felt in your chest rather than heard with your ears. And now you are here. A room 12 feet by 10, a stone floor, a chain, 5 English guards who sleep in shifts because the English do not trust you enough to leave you alone even in a locked cell inside a locked tower inside a locked castle. Tomorrow morning they will take you to the old market square. They have been building the platform for 3 days. You have heard it, the sound of timber being hauled across cobblestones, the knock of mallets in the early morning before the city woke. You knew what it was before anyone told you. You know what happens tomorrow. There is a candle on the floor near the wall. It has perhaps 4 hours left in it. When it goes out, there will be nothing, no window, no crack under the door, nothing. Just the dark and the chain and the sound of the guards breathing. You have been afraid before. You were afraid the first time you heard the voice, in your father's garden in Domrémy, 13 years old. The noon sun so bright you had to cover your eyes, and something came from the light that was not the light, a warmth that was not the warmth of summer, and a voice that said your name. You were afraid then, but you did not run. You have been afraid on the battlefield, in the mud outside Orléans, with an arrow in your shoulder and the English line still holding, and you thought, I cannot do this. I am a girl from a village in Lorraine and I cannot do this. And you pulled the arrow out yourself and you got back on your horse and you did it. You have been afraid in the courtroom, in this same building, for 5 months, while 70 accusations were read aloud, and a bishop with cold eyes asked you the same questions in different arrangements, trying to find the angle at which you would break. You did not break then. But tomorrow is not a courtroom. Tomorrow is fire. And the voice that has been with you since you were 13, the voice that told you to go, that told you France needed you, that told you the king would be crowned and you would be the one who made it so. The voice has been quiet for a long time now. You do not know if it will come tonight. You do not know if it will come at all. There are things you will think about in the hours between now and dawn. The morning you walked into the great hall at Chinon and found the Dauphin hiding among his own courtiers, and went directly to him through 100 people and knelt before a man who was dressed like a servant and told him he was the king and watched his face change. The 9th of May, 1429, the morning the English abandoned the siege of Orléans. 9 days, 6 months of siege, undone in 9 days. You were 23 miles away when you got the news, and you wept, not from relief, but from something else, something that felt like confirmation. The courtroom, 5 months of it. The bishop with the careful eyes who asked you the same questions from different angles, looking for the place where you would break. You remember the day he asked whether you believed yourself to be in a state of God's grace, and the room went quiet, because it was a perfect trap. Yes meant you claimed certainty no mortal could claim, and no meant you admitted doubt about everything you had done. You said, "If I am not, God put me there. If I am, God keep me so." The room stayed quiet for a long moment after that. You remember this now, in the dark. You were afraid then too, but you did not break. This is the story of how a girl from a village no one had heard of became the savior of France and was burned for it in the spring of 1431, at 19 years old. This is quiet history at bedtime. If this is your kind of story, a subscribe means everything right now. Every detail in this story comes from the historical record. Just relax and feel free to let this play as you drift off to sleep. Now, let us begin. Your name is Jeanne. You were born in the village of Domrémy, in the Duchy of Bar, on the eastern edge of France, sometime in the year 1412. The exact date is not recorded. In a farming village on the frontier of a country at war, the birth of a third daughter is not the kind of event that gets written down. What gets written down are harvests and taxes and the movements of soldiers. Girls are noted when they are born, and again when they are married, and the space between is their own. Your father is Jacques d'Arc. He is a farmer and a minor village official, doyen, the man who collects the taxes and mediates the disputes and represents Domrémy to the authorities above it. He is not a poor man by the standards of the village. He owns land. He owns cattle. He has a house with more than one room. He is, in the world of Domrémy, a person of some consequence. Your mother is Isabelle Romet. She is the one who taught you to pray. This is the thing you know about your childhood more clearly than anything else. Not the fields, not the cattle, not the sound of the river that ran near the village, but the prayers. The Ave Maria, the Pater Noster, the Credo. You learned them before you could read. Which is to say, you cannot read. You have never been taught. This is not unusual. Most people in Domrémy in 1412 cannot read. What they know because someone told them, and someone told that person, and the chain of telling goes back to a time before memory. You have two brothers, Jacquemin and Jeanne. An older sister, Catherine, who married young and moved to a neighboring village, and a younger brother, Pierre, who is your closest companion in the years before everything changes. Your childhood is work. This is not a complaint. It is simply what childhood is, in a farming village on the border of Lorraine in the early 15th century. You spin wool, you sew, you help with the cattle. This is the specific work you will mention later, in the courtroom, when the judges ask you what you did as a child. You tended cattle. You did the work of the house. You went to church. The church in Domrémy is dedicated to Saint Remy. You go there often, more often than other children, your neighbors will say later when they are asked. You kneel longer. You pray with a focus that other children of your age do not quite manage. You are, from very early on, a serious child. The world outside Domrémy is at war. This is not an abstraction. It is a physical fact of daily life. France and England have been at war since before your parents were born. The conflict that later historians will call the 100 Years' War, though no one living through it calls it that. They call it simply the war. The English have occupied Paris since 1420. The English have a boy king on the French throne, Henri VI, an infant when he was crowned, backed by the Burgundians, the faction of French nobility who have allied with England against the Valois line. The Valois claimant is Charles, the Dauphin, the legitimate heir to the French throne, in the view of those who support him, which is a shrinking number of people in a shrinking corner of France. He has not been crowned. He cannot be crowned while the English and Burgundians control Reims, where French kings have been crowned by tradition since Clovis in 496. He sits in Chinon, in the Loire Valley, waiting. Domrémy is technically Valois territory, but it is border country, and border country changes hands. The village has been raided by Burgundian forces. Cattle have been taken, houses burned. Your family has fled to the fortified town of Neufchâteau more than once, when the news from the roads is bad and the smoke on the horizon is close. You grow up knowing what it means to live in a country that is losing. You grow up knowing the name of the English, not as an idea, as a sound. Horses in the night, fire on the hillside, the voice of your father saying, "Take what you can carry, we go tonight." In the summer of 1425, you are 13 years old. It is a Thursday. You will remember this, though you cannot say how you are certain. You are in your father's garden, near the church. The sun is at noon, which is to say, the light is directly overhead. The shadows are short. The heat is at its fullest. You have been working. You are moving toward the house. And then something happens. It is not a sound at first. It is a light. Not the light of the sun. The sun is there. You can see it. This is something else. A brightness from the direction of the church, from the right side. And with the brightness, a voice. You are terrified. Later, in the courtroom, you will say this without shame. You were afraid. The voice was accompanied by a great light, and you did not understand what it was. You ran, or you wanted to run. You are not entirely certain, later, whether your legs worked, or whether you simply stood and shook. What you are certain of is the fear. The voice comes again the next day, and the day after. The third time, you begin to understand. The voice is accompanied by shapes, not human shapes, shapes of light, with what seem to be faces, or the suggestion of faces. Later you will say they were Saint Michael, Saint Catherine, and Saint Margaret. You will say this to the judges who are trying to kill you, and they will ask how you knew, and you will say, "I knew their voices, and I knew their faces, and I know them the way you know a person you have spoken to many times." The voices do not at first say anything about war. They say, "Be good, go to church." They speak of France only in the most general way, that France is in great sorrow, and that you should help it. You do not know at 13 what this means. You go back to spinning wool. You tend the cattle. You pray more than before, which is already more than most. But the voices do not stop. They do not stop for 4 years. By the time you are 17, in the winter of 1428, the voices have become specific. Go to Robert de Baudricourt at Vaucouleurs. Vaucouleurs is the nearest Valois garrison. Baudricourt is its commander, a practical, skeptical, middle-aged soldier who has survived the war by not doing anything stupid. He does not want a visit from a teenage girl claiming to hear saints. Your cousin, Durand Laxart, takes you. This is the first act of your public life, the first time you leave Domrémy with a purpose that has nothing to do with cattle or spinning. You are 17 years old. You walk into Baudricourt's hall and you tell him that you have been sent by the Lord of Heaven to go to the Dauphin, and that France will be saved, and that he must give you men and horses. He sends you home. Later, you will learn that he told Laxart to bring you back to your father to be slapped. You go home. The voices do not stop. Orléans is besieged by the English, the city that controls the Loire crossing, the gateway to the south, the last major city standing between the English and the complete collapse of the Valois cause. If Orléans falls, Charles falls. If Charles falls, France as a Valois kingdom is finished. The voices say, "Go back." In January 1429, you go back. This time, something is different. You have been in Vaucouleurs for several weeks, staying with Laxart and his wife. People in the town have begun to talk about you. There is a man named Jeanne de Metz who comes to see you, a soldier 20 years old, who asks, with some mixture of curiosity and skepticism, whether you really intend to go to the Dauphin. You say yes. He asks who will escort you. You say you would rather go with soldiers, but you will go alone if you must. He decides to escort you. Later, Jeanne de Metz will say that something in your manner made him believe you. He will not be able to say exactly what. This will be said about you more than once by more than one soldier. There is something in the way you speak about what you have been told that makes people believe you have been told it. Baudricourt gives you horses and men. You cut your hair. You have been wearing men's clothing for the journey. This is practical, not theatrical. A woman riding alone through enemy territory at night is in danger. A man is slightly less in danger. The voices told you to wear men's clothing. You will wear it for the rest of your life, until the moment in the courtroom when they use it against you. The journey from Vaucouleurs to Chinon takes 11 days. You ride through Burgundian territory. At night, in February, sleeping in the open or in the occasional sympathetic farmhouse, you cross the Loire at Jeanne. The English are somewhere in the dark around you, always somewhere in the dark, but they do not find you. On the 23rd of February, 1429, you arrive at the castle of Chinon. The Dauphin is there. This is the moment that everything pivots on. This is the moment that determines whether you are a mad woman or a messenger in the eyes of everyone who matters. Charles, who has reason to distrust anyone who claims to bring him divine news. There have been others, prophets and seers and well-meaning frauds, and none of them have helped. Decides to test you. He hides among his courtiers. He gives his best clothes to another man and stands in the crowd in ordinary dress. He wants to see if you can find him. You find him immediately. You walk into the hall and you go directly to him through 100 courtiers, and you kneel before him and you say, "Gentle Dauphin, I am Jeanne la Pucelle, sent by God to help you and your kingdom." He stares at you. You say, "I tell you on behalf of the Lord that you are the true heir of France and the son of the king." He takes you aside. Later, those who were watching will say that you told him something in private that made his expression change, something that only he could verify, something about his own private doubts about his legitimacy. What you told him exactly you will never say. What matters is that his expression changed. What matters is that he began to believe. He sends you to Poitiers to be examined by theologians for 3 weeks. They find no fault in you. They find no heresy. They find a girl who is direct and composed, and who, when asked how she could expect anyone to believe her, says, "I did not come to Poitiers to give signs. Take me to Orléans, and I will show you the signs I was sent to give." In April 1429, you ride out with an army. You are given armor, real armor, plate armor, made to your measurements, which means someone paid for it, and someone believed enough to pay. It is heavier than anything you have ever worn. The first time you stand in it, you feel the weight in your legs and your back and your shoulders, and you think, how do men fight like this? How does anyone move in this? You learn. The armor becomes familiar the way all difficult things become familiar, through repetition, through the body's adaptation, through the gradual discovery that what seemed impossible is merely hard. You are given a white banner. On it, the image of Christ in judgment, angels at his sides, the words, Jesus Maria. This is what you carry in battle, not a sword. You have a sword, recovered from behind the altar of a church at Fierbois, exactly where the voices told you it would be. But the banner is what you hold. You will say in the courtroom that you loved your banner 40 times more than your sword. The army rides for Orléans. The English have besieged the city since October 1428. They have built a ring of fortifications around it, bastilles, strong points, blocking the roads and the river. The city is starving. Its people have been holding for months. They have been told that help is coming, that a maiden sent by God is coming, and they have held on in the specific way that people hold on when they have been given something to hold on to. On the 29th of April, you enter Orléans. The people line the streets. They push forward to touch you, to touch your horse, to touch your banner. You will describe this later as difficult to manage. The press of people, the noise, the torchlight. A man's torch catches your banner, and you rein your horse around and manage the flame with a composure that impresses the soldiers riding with you. In the days that follow, you do something that experienced military commanders do not expect from someone who has never commanded anything. You attack. The standard military doctrine at Orléans, as practiced by the French commanders who have been there since October, is to wait and consolidate and not expose your forces unnecessarily. You reject this entirely. You tell the commanders that the voices have told you what to do, and you do it, and when they do not follow quickly enough, you do not wait for them. On the 4th of May, the English Bastille of Saint-Lô falls. On the 6th, the Augustins. On the 7th, Les Tourelles, the fortified bridge tower that has blocked the river crossing. On the 7th of May, an English arrow hits you above the left breast, penetrating your armor at the gap near the shoulder. You are pulled back from the fighting. You cry. The wound is treated, and you refuse to leave the field. You pull the arrow out. There are different accounts of whether you pulled it yourself or were helped, but you are present for the pulling, which is enough. You go back. The English withdraw from Les Tourelles that evening. The Loire is open. On the 8th of May, the English abandon the siege entirely. 9 days. The siege of Orléans, which is held for 6 months and which the most experienced commanders in France did not know how to break, is broken in 9 days. You ride with the army through the summer. Town after town, the English positions fall or surrender. In June, the English force that moves to block you is destroyed at Patay, one of the most complete French victories of the entire war. You are not the commander at Patay. You are present. Your presence has become, in itself, a thing that affects the outcome. A fact about morale that is as real as any fact about troop numbers or artillery positions. In July, you reach Reims. The coronation of Charles VII takes place on the 17th of July, 1429. The Cathedral of Reims, the light through the windows, the sound of the crowd. You stand near the altar with your banner, because, as you will say afterward, it was only right that the banner that shared the labor should share the honor. The crown goes on his head, and something in you on that day knows that it is finished. Not the war. The war will go on for another 24 years before it finally ends, but you're part of it. The thing the voices told you to do, you have done it. That evening, you write a letter to the Duke of Burgundy, urging him to make peace with Charles. The letter is courteous and clear and goes unanswered. In the months that follow, things change. The king, now crowned, is not the king you went to find in the darkened hall at Chinon. The king who needed you, who needed the legitimacy your voices gave him, who needed the armies your presence inspired, that king is different from the king who now sits on a throne and manages a court and negotiates with enemies and allies through channels that do not include a teenage girl from Domrémy. He does not send you away. He does not dishonor you. He simply stops listening. You want to push north, to Paris. The English still hold Paris. The voices say, push north, move quickly, do not stop. The king negotiates a truce with Burgundy. The truce expires. You attack Paris in September 1429, without the king's full support, without enough men, and you are wounded again, this time in the thigh, and you are pulled back, and the attack fails, and Paris does not fall. After that, there are smaller campaigns, towns, skirmishes, the sense of a mission that has lost its clear shape. In May 1430, at Compiègne, you are unhorsed during a sortie outside the city walls and taken prisoner by a Burgundian soldier. You are sold to the English for 10,000 livres. You are brought to Rouen. Now you are in this room. Now it is the night of the 29th of May, 1431. Now the candle has burned down to perhaps 3 inches. Now the chain around your ankle sits on the straw, cold and heavy and utterly indifferent to everything you have done and everything you are, and outside the narrow slit in the stone wall that serves as a window, the city of Rouen is quiet, and the old market square is ready, and somewhere in the dark above the city the stars are doing what stars do on clear May nights in Normandy. You are 19 years old. You have been in this castle for 5 months. You lie back on the straw and look at the ceiling and breathe. The candle makes shadows on the stone. The chain is cold. You have been here before, not in this room, but in this moment. The moment before, the moment when you do not know what is coming, and you cannot change what is coming, and the only thing left to you is the next breath, and then the one after that. You breathe. The night is long. It is not over yet. The chain moves when you shift your weight. It makes a sound, not loud, a small dragging sound against the stone floor, and one of the guards stirs. You hear him turn over on his pallet, then stillness again. You have learned the sounds of this room the way you once learned the sounds of your father's house in Domrémy, the specific creak of the third stair, the way the wind found the gap under the north-facing door in January. A person confined long enough learns a room the way a blind person learns a face, by touch and sound, by the small variations in the dark. The candle is lower now, 2 inches perhaps. You think about Compiègne. It is the thing you have come back to more often than any other in these 5 months. The way it happened, the specific mechanics of it, not because understanding it changes anything, it changes nothing, but because the mind, given no other work, will do the work it finds, and the mind finds Compiègne. It was the 23rd of May, 1430. You had been in Compiègne for 2 days. The town was under threat from a combined Burgundian and English force, and you had ridden in to help. This was by then what you did. You went where the need was. The king had no campaign for you. The grand momentum of the Loire had slowed to nothing, and so you went where the fighting was, and you did what you could. On the 23rd, you led a sortie out of the city gates. A sortie is not a pitched battle. It is a fast, targeted strike. Out of the gates, hit the enemy position, back inside before they can respond in force. You had done this before. You knew how it worked. The variables were the usual ones: timing, cohesion of your force, the speed of the enemy response. What you did not know was that the Burgundian forces that day were larger than your scouts had reported. What you did not know was that the gate captain, watching from the walls, would judge wrongly as it turned out, though you are past caring about the wrongness, that the sortie had failed and that closing the gates was the correct action. The gates closed while you were still outside. You turned your horse. The Burgundians were behind you, alongside you, ahead of you. You fought. A soldier grabbed your coat, a long surcoat over the armor, and pulled you off your horse. You were on the ground. You were taken. The soldier who took you was John de Luxembourg's man. John de Luxembourg sold you to the English. The English paid 10,000 livres, the ransom price of a prince, which is what they considered you, or rather what they considered the problem of you. A girl who had led armies and crowned kings and inspired an entire country to believe that God had not abandoned France. That was worth 10,000 livres to remove. The journey to Rouen took months. You were held first at Beaulieu, then at Beauvoir. At Beauvoir, you tried to escape. You jumped from the tower, from a height of 60 feet, which is the height that the record gives, though you find the number difficult to believe when you think about it now. You were not trying to die. You were trying to get out. The voices had told you not to jump. You jumped anyway. You were found unconscious at the base of the wall. You were not seriously hurt, which the guards considered miraculous and you considered beside the point. You were hurt enough to be confined more strictly afterward. In December 1430, you arrived in Rouen. Rouen in 1430 is the capital of English-occupied Normandy. It has been under English control since 1419, when Henry V took it after a siege that lasted 6 months and involved the starvation of the civilian population. The English are not visitors here. They are the government. The castle where you are held, the castle where you have now been for 5 months, is the center of English administrative power in France. The man who runs your trial is Pierre Cochon. You have thought about Cochon a great deal in these 5 months. You have sat across the courtroom from him more times than you can count, and studied his face the way you once studied the faces of English commanders from across a battlefield, not with hatred, but with the professional attention of someone who needs to understand what the other person wants. What Cochon wants is not a conviction. A conviction is easy. You are a woman claiming to hear the voices of saints. You are a woman who has worn men's clothing for 2 years. You are a woman who refused repeatedly and explicitly to submit your visions to the judgment of the Church. Any one of these things in 1431 is enough to convict. The conviction is not the difficulty. What Cochon wants is a recantation. He wants you to say that the voices were not from God. He wants you to say that you were deceived, or that you deceived others, or that the whole of it, Orléans, Reims, the Loire campaign, the king's coronation, was built on a lie that you invented, and that France believed because France was desperate and credulous. He wants this because the English need it. The English have a political problem. They crowned a king, and a girl from a village in Lorraine rode out with an army and undid their king and crowned another. If the voices were from God, then God is against them. If the voices were from the devil, then the whole episode becomes a French embarrassment. The Dauphin crowned by the power of a heretic. The campaign of Orléans conducted under demonic inspiration. This is what is actually on trial in this courtroom. Not your soul, not your heresy, the legitimacy of Charles VII. You understood this before the trial began. You understand it now, lying on the straw in the dark, the candle burning lower. This does not make it easier, but it makes it clearer, and clarity is a thing you have always valued. The trial began in January 1431. It began, formally, with 70 charges. The charges were read aloud by the promoter, Jeanne d'Estivée, a thin man with a precise manner who read the charges in Latin, which you do not understand, so that the substance of each accusation reached you through the translation of the court clerk, filtered through the particular bias of whoever was doing the translating. You asked early on whether you could have your own counsel. You were refused. You asked whether the French clergy who supported Charles could be represented at the trial. You were refused. You asked whether women of good character could testify on your behalf. You were refused. You sat in the courtroom and answered the questions alone, with no preparation and no advice, in front of 62 assessors and judges, most of them men of considerable theological and legal education, all of them selected by Cochon. And you were, by every account that survives, formidable. The questions they asked were designed as traps. Will you submit to the Church? If you say yes, then your visions and voices are subject to the Church's judgment, and the Church, as currently constituted in this courtroom, will judge them demonic. If you say no, you are by definition a heretic who places private revelation above ecclesiastical authority. There is no answer that saves you from one side or the other. You found a third position. You said, I submit to God and the Church, but the Church in this room is not the Church I submit to. I submit to the Church triumphant, the Church of God and the saints in heaven, and to the Pope in Rome, not to you. Cochon told you the Pope was too far away. You said, that is not my problem. The questions about your voices. Will you say the voices were from God? You said, I do not know by what means God speaks to his angels, but I know what I have been told, and I believe it came from God. They asked whether your voices had promised you would be freed. You said, that is not something I will tell you. They asked whether the voices commanded you to do everything you did, including the soldiers and the campaign and the killing. You said, I asked for guidance and I followed what I was told, and what I was told came from God. They asked at one point whether you believed you were in a state of grace. You said, if I am not, God put me there. If I am, God keep me so. The courtroom was quiet for a moment after that. Even Cauchon was quiet. The 70 charges were reduced to 12. The 12 charges were sent to the University of Paris for judgment. The University of Paris found you guilty on all counts. The primary charges, wearing men's clothing, claiming to receive divine revelation without the sanction of the church, and refusing to submit your visions to ecclesiastical authority. On the 24th of May, they brought you to the cemetery of Saint-Ouen. You had been told you would be burned that morning. You had prepared yourself as much as a person can prepare for such a thing. You had received confession. You had said what you needed to say internally, in the dark of the cell, in the night hours that are always the most honest hours. But in the cemetery, with the platform and the crowd and Cauchon before you, they offered you a choice. Sign a document of abjuration, a formal recantation, a few lines of text stating that you renounced your visions and your men's clothing and submitted yourself to the judgment of the church, and the sentence of death would be commuted to life imprisonment. You have thought about that moment every day since it happened. You signed. You will not make excuses for why you signed. You know why you signed. You were standing in front of a crowd in a cemetery, and the wood was piled, and you were 19 years old, and you were afraid. That is the whole of it. You were afraid. The voices had been silent for weeks. You did not know if they would come back. You did not know if you had been wrong. You signed. They gave you a woman's dress to wear. You were put back in your cell. For 3 days, you wore the dress, and you sat in the cell, and you thought about what you had done. The guards were still there, the English soldiers, sleeping in shifts, because even after a signed recantation, the English did not trust you enough to leave you alone. On the 4th day, you put the men's clothing back on. Why? You have been asked this by the judges who used it as the ground for the finding of relapse. You have been asked it by the solitaire who came to pray with you. You have asked it yourself in the hours of this night, lying here with the candle burning down. The honest answer is this: you were given no choice. The guards took the woman's clothing. You have said this in the courtroom, and it was ignored, because it is not a convenient answer for anyone. The guards took the dress. The men's clothing was what remained. But there is also another answer, which is truer and harder to say. When you put the men's clothing back on, you knew what it meant. You knew that it ended the reprieve. You knew that the relapse judgment was certain, and the sentence of death was certain, and there was no further negotiation possible. You put it on anyway, because the recantation was a lie, and you have never been able to sustain a lie for very long, because the voices came back on the 4th day and told you that your abjuration was wicked and that God had not told you to do it. Because signing the paper meant that the king you crowned and the armies you led and the voices you heard for 6 years were all a fraud, and you could not make that true by signing your name to it. The relapse judgment came on the 28th of May. Tomorrow is the 29th, or rather, you can hear the city outside, distant and quiet. Tomorrow has begun. It is already past midnight. It is already the 30th of May, 1431. The candle is very low now. You think about the cell at Beaurevoir, where you were held before Rouen. It was different from this one. Higher up, a longer drop from the window, a view of fields rather than a courtyard. You spent the summer and autumn there, watching the seasons change through the narrow window. Burgundy in summer is not so different from Lorraine. The same particular green of the fields in June, the same quality of evening light in August, long and amber. The kind of light that makes even an occupied country look like something worth saving. At Beaurevoir, they told you the English were going to take you to Rouen for trial. You jumped. Not because you wanted to die. You want to be precise about this, even now, even alone in the dark. You jumped because you wanted to escape, and the window was the only opening available. And 60 feet is a long way down, but it is not certainly fatal. Not if you land correctly. Not if you are fortunate. You were not fortunate, but you were not dead either, which you took as information about what God intended. The voices were angry with you afterward. Saint Catherine came and told you that you should not have done it, that you should have waited, that God would help those in Compiègne who were suffering. You said, you remember saying this, on the floor of the cell, barely able to sit up from the fall. You said, I would rather die than be in the hands of the English. Saint Catherine said, accept this. God will help you and those in Compiègne. You accepted it. You were brought to Rouen in December. The castle is called the Château de Bouvray. The Bouvray Tower, where you are now, is the part they have given you. Given is not the right word. Assigned, confined. The tower is solid Norman stonework. The walls 3 feet thick. The window slit too narrow for a body to pass through, even if the drop were not lethal. They are not going to lose you twice to a window. The cell is on the middle level of the tower. Below you are stores, grain, equipment, the ordinary logistics of a castle in military use. Above you is the upper room, where Cochan and his assessors came to examine you informally before the formal trial began, when they were still deciding exactly how to frame the charges. 5 guards, always 5. All of them English soldiers, none of them French, none of them sympathetic in any direction you can detect. They have their orders and they follow them, and they do not talk to you unless it is necessary. In January, the formal trial began. You were taken to the chapel of the castle for the first sessions, a smaller space than the great hall, more controllable, easier for Cochan to manage. Later, when the questioning became more focused, you were examined in a room called the robing room, which was given that name for reasons that had nothing to do with you and that strike you now as grim in their irony. The assessors filled the benches, 62 of them at the beginning, clergy, lawyers, theologians, the assembled intellectual weight of Cochan's France. Most of them were sincere. This is the thing you have come to believe in the long consideration of these 5 months. Most of the men in that room believed that what they were doing was correct, that a girl who claimed to hear saints and wore men's clothing and refused to submit to the church's judgment was genuinely a danger to the proper order of things. Most of them were not cruel, they were certain. Certainty is more dangerous than cruelty in the end. The questions came for weeks. Will you say your voices were from God? I believe they were from God. Can you prove they were from God? I believe them more firmly than I believe you. Are you assured of your salvation? I hope for it. Do you know if you are in a state of grace? If I am not, God put me there. If I am, God keep me so. That answer stopped the room. You could feel it. The pause that comes when something unexpected has been said, when the questioner's prepared response does not apply to what they have actually heard. Cauchon moved on quickly, but you felt it. They asked about the voices in great detail. When did they come? In the morning or the evening? Were they accompanied by light? Did they smell of anything? Did they touch you? What language did they speak? You answered what you could answer, and refused what you would not answer, and made the distinction clearly. There are things I know and will tell you, and there are things I know and will not tell you, and there are things I have been told not to tell, and you will not have them. They asked about your childhood, your father, your mother, the cattle, the church at Domrémy. They asked whether the tree near the village, the fairies' tree, the locals called it, a large beech, whether you had danced around it. You said yes, as a child, with the other children. As children do, they tried to make something of this. You let them try. They asked about the men's clothing. This was always where they spent the most time. Why did you wear it? Because the voices told me to. But God made woman to wear woman's clothing. God made woman to do what God commands her to do. Did you wear it in battle? Yes. Did you wear it among soldiers? Yes. Was it not immodest? I wore it to protect myself. There were practical reasons. The voices told me to. I will not say more than that. They came back to this again and again, throughout January and February and into March. The armor, the short hair, the insistence on men's dress even after the capture, even in the cell. They wanted you to say it was wrong. You would not say it was wrong because you did not believe it was wrong. The questions about the king. Did you tell the king he was the true heir of France? Yes. What sign did you give him? I will not tell you. What did you say to him privately? I will not tell you that either. Was the sign an angel? A voice? A crown? I will not tell you. You protected Charles. Through the entire trial, through every session, through every angle from which they approached the question, you protected him. You said nothing that would damage him. You said nothing that would make his coronation more vulnerable than it already was. He did not ask you to do this. He did not instruct you. He did not even know, as far as you are aware, what was being asked of you in this room. You did it because it was right. You did it because whatever Charles has or has not been to you, whatever diminishing and silence and failure to act has passed between you since Reims, the thing you did for France was real, and you will not undo it for the sake of an easier death. The 70 charges, the 12 charges, the University of Paris, the cemetery of Saint-Ouen, the abjuration, the dress, the men's clothing put back on, the finding of relapse on the 28th of May. They told you yesterday morning after the finding. Cauchon came himself with 2 of the senior assessors. He told you that the ecclesiastical court had found you to be a relapsed heretic, and that the sentence of death would be carried out the following day. You asked for confession. He paused. He did not want to give you this. An excommunicated, relapsed heretic has, strictly speaking, no right to the sacraments. But he gave you confession. You do not know why. Perhaps there is something in him that is not entirely what this trial has required him to be. You asked for communion. He paused longer. He left without answering. Later, in the afternoon, one of the other clergy, the one they call Isambart de la Pierre, a younger man who has been quietly kind to you throughout, who has brought you what comfort is permitted, came and told you that Cochon had agreed. You would receive communion in the morning. You thanked him. He looked at you for a moment. He said, "Is there anything else I can do?" You thought about this. You said, "Pray for me." He said he would. He left. The evening came. The guards ate their supper. You heard the smell of it, a stew of some kind, bread. One of them offered you some. You ate a little. You were not hungry, but you thought you should eat. Now the night is here. Now the candle is very low. The flame is doing what flames do near the end, burning a little larger than it should, as if it knows something. Flames do not know things. You know this, but in a room with no other light, in a night with no other company, the candle is a presence, and you watch it the way you watch any presence that will not be there much longer. You think about your mother, Isabelle Rouen. She taught you the Ave Maria and the Pater Noster and the Credo. She is alive. You believe she is alive. You have not seen her since you left Domrémy in January 1429. 2 years and 4 months. She knows what has happened. Everyone in France knows what has happened. Whether she has been told about tomorrow, you do not know. You would like her to know that you are not afraid. This is not entirely true, but it is true enough to say. The candle burns. You breathe. The night is not over yet. The candle goes out. Not gradually. One moment it is there, the small orange point of it, the faint smell of tallow, the way it made the shadows move on the stone, and then it is not. The dark that replaces it is not the dark of a room with a curtained window or a door left ajar. It is the dark of 3 feet of Norman stonework on every side. It is complete. It is the kind of dark that has weight. You do not move. One of the guards shifts on his pallet. You hear the straw compress under him, the small sounds of a sleeping body adjusting. Then silence. You have been in darkness before, on the road from Vaucouleurs to Chinon, riding at night through Burgundian territory. There were hours so dark that you could not see the horse beneath you. You navigated by sound, the creak of the saddle, the breathing of the men riding with you. Jeanne de Metz ahead saying quietly, "There is a turn here, stay close." The dark was something to move through then. It had a direction. This dark has no direction. You are lying on straw on a stone floor in the lowest occupied room of a tower in a castle in a city that belongs to the English, and in 4 or 5 hours it will be morning, and in the morning they will come for you. You find that you are not thinking about the fire. You are thinking about a morning in Orléans 2 years ago. The 8th of May, 1429. You had been fighting for 9 days. The day before, The 7th, you had taken Les Tourelles, the fortified tower at the bridge, and an English arrow had gone into the gap above your left breast, below the collarbone, and out through your back. You remember the specific moment of it. Not the pain, which came later, but the impact, which was like being hit with a closed fist by someone very strong, and the surprise of it, which was genuine. You had known the arrow was possible. You had not, in the moment, quite believed it would come. They pulled you back. You were taken behind the lines. The wound was packed with the fat that surgeons used, and you wept. This is in the record, that you wept, which matters to you now because it means you were afraid, and it is good to remember that you were afraid and you went back anyway. You pulled the arrow out, or helped pull it. There are different accounts, and you went back to the fighting. The next morning, the 8th, you woke before dawn. You did not need to be woken. Your shoulder hurt. It hurt badly, the particular burning ache of a wound that has been closed but not healed, and you had slept in the armor, which is not comfortable, and you were on the floor of a house in Orléans where the commander had put you the night before. There was no candle. There was no light. There was only the dark, and the ache, and the knowledge that outside the city walls the English were still there. And then, in the dark, the voices came. Not words, not yet. First the light, even with your eyes open, even in a room with no light source. The brightness that accompanied the voices was visible, a warmth from the right side, a pressure in the air that was not wind. And then the voice of Saint Catherine, whom you knew by now as you knew a person you had spoken with many times, and she said, "Get up, it is today." You got up. Your shoulder still hurt. The armor was cold. You went outside into the May morning, and the sky was the particular pale blue of early morning, and across the fields the English fortifications were still there, and none of it looked like something that could be finished today. But you said, "It is today." It was today. By evening, the English were gone. You hold this memory now in the dark of this cell, the way you hold the things that have been real when reality becomes uncertain. The voices told you to get up. You got up, and the thing they said would happen, happened. This is not proof of anything. You have thought about this carefully, in the long hours of the cell, in the silences between one examination and the next. The voices could have been wrong. The voices could have been your own mind, your own hope, your own desperate need for the thing you wanted to be told. You have considered this, you have sat with it, and every time you sit with it, you come back to the same place. You were a girl from a farming village who had never held a sword, who had never commanded anything more complex than a field rotation with her brother. You walked into a courtroom in Poitiers and answered the questions of the most educated theologians in France for 3 weeks, and they found nothing wrong with you. You walked into the siege of Orléans and broke it in 9 days. You found the Dauphin in a crowd of 100 courtiers when he was deliberately hiding from you. These things happened. Whatever their source, these things happened. The dark in the cell is absolute. You breathe. Somewhere in the city, distant, the sound traveling oddly through stone and narrow streets, a bell sounds. You count 2, 3, 3 o'clock in the morning, the canonical hour of matins. The night office, the prayer said in the deep middle of the night when the world is at its darkest and the body most wants sleep. In the monasteries and convents across France, At this moment, monks and nuns are rising to pray. You know this the way you know the prayers your mother taught you, not as an idea but as a fact of the body, something absorbed over years of practice. You pray, not out loud. The guards do not need to hear it. You say the Ave Maria in your mind, slowly, the way your mother taught you, not rushing, not running the words together the way people do when they are trying to finish a prayer rather than say one. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. You have said this prayer 10,000 times. You say it again. After the Ave Maria, the Pater Noster. After the Pater Noster, the Credo. You have no book. You have never had a book. You cannot read. What you have is the chain of telling that goes back before you were born, the words your mother put in your mouth before you could understand them, which you understood later, which you have been carrying ever since. I believe in God, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. You believe this. You have believed this in the middle of battles when the noise was so great you could not hear your own voice. You believed it in the courtroom when Cochon asked you, for the 14th time, whether you submitted to the church, and the church he meant was the one in front of you, and you knew that submitting would mean saying everything you had done was false. You believe it now, in this cell, in this dark, on the last night of your life. The belief has never been the difficult part. What has been difficult? What has been the specific texture of this night's difficulty, as distinct from all the other difficult nights in other cells in other towers, is the silence of the voices. They came back after the abjuration. Saint Catherine came on the 4th day after the signing and told you that your abjuration had been wicked and that you had damned yourself to save your life and that God had not commanded you to sign. This was not a comfortable thing to be told, but it was a thing you recognized, the voice that had been with you since you were 13, the specific quality of it, the warmth and the light. You knew it. Since the relapse judgment 2 days ago, they have been quiet. You have asked, you have prayed, you have done the things that have always brought them, stillness, attention, the specific quality of listening that is different from waiting. You have had moments in the past 2 days when you thought you felt something at the edge of attention, the faintest suggestion of warmth from the right side, a quality of the air that seemed to change. Nothing certain, nothing clear. You breathe in the dark and you think, perhaps they will come tonight. And then you think, perhaps they will not need to. You have been afraid of dying. This is true, and you do not intend to pretend otherwise. Not here, not in the dark with no one listening. You are 19 years old. You have been alive for 19 years, and in those 19 years you have seen more than most people see in 60. But the fact of being 19 is still a fact, and the fact of dying is still a fact, and they sit together in this cell without resolving into anything comfortable. What you are not afraid of, and this is the thing you have been working toward, in the hours since the candle went out, in the prayers and the memories and the slow quieting of the mind that comes eventually even in the worst nights, what you are not afraid of is having been wrong. You were not wrong. You were a girl from Domrémy, and the voices told you to go, and you went, and France needed what you brought, and the king was crowned, and Orléans was freed, and the English have been losing ground steadily ever since, slowly, without the urgency you wanted, without the clean finality you believed was possible. but losing. The English are losing. You did not cause all of this. You were one part of something larger, but you were the part that turned it. And you know this, and more importantly, France knows this. And you think, lying in the dark, in the straw, with the chain cold against your ankle, you think your mother knows this. Isabelle Romay. You think about her now the way you have been thinking about her all night, in pieces and fragments, the way she stood when she was teaching you to pray, not kneeling, which surprised you as a child, but standing with her hands folded before her and her eyes open, as if God were a person in the room she was speaking to directly. The smell of the kitchen in the evening when she was cooking, the particular smell of whatever was on the fire, which changed with the seasons, which you can reconstruct now with perfect accuracy. Root vegetables in autumn, greens in spring, always bread, always the underlying smell of the fire itself. She is alive, you think. You believe she is alive. She will grieve. This is the thing about dying that has nothing to do with theology or politics or the question of whether the voices were real. Your mother will grieve. Your brothers will grieve. Pierre, who followed you, who came in the end to the campaigns to be near you. Pierre is somewhere. You do not know where. You have not seen him since the capture at Compiègne. You hope he is not in Rouen. You hope he is somewhere with green fields and a road he knows. In the city outside, the bell sounds again, a single stroke, 3:30. 2.5 hours until dawn, perhaps. 2.5 hours is a long time. You settle back on the straw. The dark is the same dark it was before the prayers, before the memories, before the long consideration of everything that has led to this night. The chain is the same weight. The guards are the same guards, sleeping their shifts. But something has shifted in you. Not dramatically, not in the way that happens in stories. No sudden peace, no final understanding. No voice out of the dark with its warmth and its light, simply a settling, the way a fire settles when it has been burning long enough. Not going out, just going quieter, lower, more itself. You are Jeanne. You were born in Domrémy, and you heard voices in a garden, and you went where they told you to go, and you did what they told you to do. And the king was crowned and Orléans was freed. And tomorrow they will burn you in the old market square of Rouen. And you were not wrong. You breathe. The dark is patient. You are more patient than the dark. You think about the trial, not the whole of it. You have spent enough of this night on the whole of it. You think about a specific day, the 19th of February, an early session, the second week of formal examination. The assessors had spent the previous day on the question of your banner, the white banner with Jesus Maria and the image of Christ in judgment. They wanted to know why you had carried a banner rather than a sword. They wanted to understand the specific theology of it, the specific claim it made. A sword kills. A banner means something. What did it mean? You said, I loved my banner 40 times more than my sword. I never killed anyone with my sword. They wrote this down. Later they asked whether it was true that English soldiers fled at the sight of your banner. You said yes, at Orléans they fled. They asked why. You said, because God willed it. They moved on, but you remember the specific texture of that moment, the way the question and the answer felt. the particular combination of the practical and the absolute that characterized every exchange in that courtroom. They wanted to reduce what happened to something explainable: sorcery, fraud, delusion, and you kept giving them the only answer you had, which was the true one. God willed it. This is not an answer that the legal and theological machinery of 1431 knows how to process. It either destroys you or it doesn't, and there is no position between. You think about another question they asked near the end of the examination: whether you knew you would be captured. The voices had warned you. St. Catherine told you in the spring of 1430 that you would be taken before the feast of St. John, before midsummer. You had not told anyone. You had continued the campaigns as though the warning changed nothing, which in practical terms it did not. The warning did not say when or where or how to prevent it. It said only, you will be taken. You were taken. You have thought about this more than you have thought about almost anything else in these 5 months, not as a reproach, not as evidence that the voices failed you, or that you failed the voices, or that any of it was false, but as a thing to understand. If the voices knew you would be taken and told you, and you continued anyway, what does this mean about what you were doing and why you were doing it? You think it means the work was the work, regardless of what happened afterward. The voices told you to go to Orléans. You went. The voices told you the king would be crowned. He was crowned. The voices told you that you would be taken before midsummer. You were taken. Each of these things happened, not as comfort and not as punishment, but as fact, the shape of what was, which was always larger than what you could see from inside it. You think, I was given what I needed to know, in the order I needed to know it. You think, that has to be enough. And then, in the dark, you think, it is enough. The city outside is quieter now than it was at midnight, the specific quiet of the hours between 3 and 5, when even the people who keep unusual hours are sleeping. A city breathes differently at this hour. The smells are different. The fires banked, the cooking not yet started, the animals still. You know this quality of night from the campaign, from the rides through hostile territory in the dark, from the hours before battle when the camp was quiet and the men slept and you were awake. You were always awake before battle. Not because you were too afraid to sleep, though you were afraid, but because the voices came more clearly in those hours. The quiet of the world between 3 and 5 seems to carry sound differently, or rather it removes the noise that normally surrounds every other hour, and in the absence of noise the voices were closer. You wait. You listen in the way you have learned to listen, which is not the listening you do with your ears. It is a different faculty, an attention directed inward and also somehow outward simultaneously, a quality of stillness that is not passivity. You have tried to explain this to the judges when they asked about the voices and how you received them. You said, I hear them better when the church bells are ringing. The sound of the bells is like, and you paused because you do not have the language for it, which is the difficulty with speaking about things that are real but not visible, real but not mechanical. You said, the bells make a silence inside the sound. The judges wrote this down. They did not know what to do with it, which was the same difficulty you had with much of what you knew. Something shifts. It is not dramatic. It is not the brightness you associate with the voices at their clearest. No warmth from the right side. no sense of presence in the room. It is quieter than that, more like the feeling that sometimes precedes rain, a change in the quality of the air rather than a change in its content, a settling. St. Catherine's voice, when it comes, is faint, but it comes. It says, in the way it has always said things, not in words exactly, not in the way one person says words to another, but in the way meaning sometimes arrives fully formed before language catches up with it. It says, do not be afraid of what you must suffer. You will come to the kingdom of paradise. You have been told this before. In prison, more than once. The voices have spoken of paradise before, not as consolation, you have always felt, but as information, the same register in which they told you to go to Vaucouleurs, to go to Chinon, to attack Les Tourelles. Information, not comfort, though in this case the distinction is perhaps less important than it usually is. You breathe. The message is received. The darkness is the same darkness it was before. The chain is the same chain. The guards are still sleeping. Nothing in the room has changed. You are less afraid. Not unafraid, less afraid. There is still the fact of the morning to come, and the square, and the wood, and the things you know will happen. But the specific dread that has been building since yesterday morning, since Cochon came and said the sentence would be carried out today, that is loosened slightly, not resolved, loosened. You close your eyes, which changes nothing in a room this dark, but is a different state of the body, and you breathe, and you wait for the morning to come, which it will, because mornings always come, even this one, even now. Outside the city, the sky over Normandy is beginning, very slowly, barely perceptibly, to shift from black to the deep blue that comes before blue, the color that is not yet light but is no longer entirely night. You cannot see it, but you know it is there. The morning is coming. You breathe. The light comes back before the guards wake. Not sunlight. The window slit faces west, and the morning sun will not reach it. But the quality of the darkness changes. What was absolute becomes approximate. The outline of the door, the shape of the nearest guard's pallet, the floor, which you can feel but now faintly begin to see, gray on gray, the specific palette of a Norman morning coming through stone. You have not slept. You do not feel what you expected to feel after a sleepless night. There is a tiredness, yes, but it is a clean tiredness, the tiredness that comes after long effort, rather than the gummy heaviness that comes from sleep interrupted. You have been awake and working in the way that the mind works when it is given the right conditions, quietly, carefully, going over what it knows. You sit up. The chain moves. One of the guards stirs. He opens his eyes and looks at you. A quick, flat assessment, the look of a man checking that the thing he is guarding is where he left it. You are where he left you. He closes his eyes. You smooth the straw around you, which is a habitual gesture, meaningless but satisfying in the specific way that small orderings of space are satisfying when larger orderings are not available. You straighten your legs. You roll your shoulders, slowly, because of the shoulder that was wounded at Orléans, which aches in the morning in cold weather, which has ached every morning in this cell through the winter and the spring, which will ache this morning for the last time. You think about this for a moment. The last time. There is a strange quality to the last time of anything. You would not have noticed this morning's ache if you had not known it was the last one. And knowing it is the last one makes it more present, not less. You are aware of the shoulder in a way you have not been for months, since it settled into the category of ordinary persistent pain that the body manages without conscious attention. The shoulder aches. You are aware of it. You think, I am alive. This is not a dramatic thought. It is simply the noticing of a fact that tends to go unnoticed most mornings. You are alive. Your heart is working. Your lungs are working. The blood is moving through you in the way it has moved through you for 19 years, without your assistance or attention, doing the work of keeping you here. For a few more hours. The city is waking outside. You can hear it beginning. The first sounds of a city that has been quiet since 3, now gradually filling with the sounds of people who have things to do this morning. The sound of a cart somewhere. A dog. Voices in the distance too far away to resolve into words. In Domrémy, the morning sounds were different. Roosters, cattle, the specific sound of a farming village resuming its work. In Rouen, the sounds are urban, more complex, more anonymous. A city of 15,000 people, the largest city in France outside Paris, waking up on the 30th of May, 1431. Most of them know what is happening today. The English want people to see. This is the point of a public execution. Not punishment alone, but demonstration. The English need the people of Rouen and the people of France more broadly to understand what has happened here. The girl who said she was sent by God has been found to be a heretic. The king she crowned was crowned by heretical means. The victories at Orléans were achieved through sorcery. This is the message. This is what the platform in the old market square is meant to transmit. You think about whether it will work. You do not think it will work. Not because you are certain of your own legacy. You are not thinking about legacy, which is a concept for people who have time to think about such things, but because you have read, not read, been told, which is the same thing for you. You have been told the story of other moments when the English tried to make a demonstration, and the demonstration became something else. The executed martyr who becomes more powerful dead than alive. The burning that illuminates rather than extinguishes. You do not say this to yourself with confidence. You are not in this moment thinking about posterity. You are thinking about the morning, but somewhere underneath the thinking, there is a quieter knowledge, the same quieter knowledge that has been with you since Domrémy, and it says, this is not the end of the story. Footsteps in the corridor. Not the guards, these footsteps are different, lighter, a deliberate, measured pace. The footsteps of a man who is going somewhere with a purpose that has been decided in advance. You know this sound. You have heard it throughout the months of the trial, the approach of clergy, of examiners, of the people who have authority over what happens to you. The door opens. It is Isambart de la Pierre. He is perhaps 40, a Dominican friar, with the lean, attentive face of a man who reads a great deal and sleeps insufficiently. He has been present at the trial throughout, not as an accuser, not as a judge, but as one of the assessors, and there have been moments in the courtroom when you have caught his expression and seen something there that was not quite what was on the other faces. Not sympathy, exactly. Something more careful than sympathy. A witnessing. He is carrying something. He is carrying the host. The communion wafer, the consecrated bread that is, in the theology you were raised in, the body of Christ. You asked for this yesterday. Cochon hesitated. He agreed. And here it is, brought by the man who has been, throughout these 5 months, the closest thing to a human kindness that this castle has produced. You rise. You rise as you would rise in church, in the way your mother taught you, standing fully, not crouching, with a straightness that is not prideful but is attentive. The act of receiving communion requires a body that is ready for it. You have been preparing for this since last night, which is to say, you have been in a state of prayer since the candle went out, which is not nothing. Ismbat says the words. You respond with the responses you know. The Latin is not language to you. You do not understand the Latin, have never understood it. Learn the responses as sounds attached to meaning rather than as comprehended text. But the sounds are right. The sounds are the ones your mother taught you, and the ones the priest in Domrémy used on the Sundays of your childhood, and the ones you have said in the field before battle and in the cell before examination. The sounds are continuous. The sounds connect this room, this morning, to everything before it. The body of Christ. You receive it. You stand with the host dissolving on your tongue, and you say nothing, because there is nothing to say. The sacrament does not require commentary. It requires presence. You are present. You are as present as you have ever been in your life, which is saying something, because you have been present on battlefields and in courtyards where the outcome was not known. This is a different kind of presence. Isambard stands with you for a moment after. You look at him. He looks at you. He says quietly, "Is there anything you wish me to tell anyone?" You think about this. You say, "Tell my mother that I pray for her." He nods. You say, "And that I was not alone at the end." He says he will. He leaves. The guards are fully awake now. They are moving with the particular efficiency of men who have been told what they need to do this morning, and are doing it, not unkindly, not cruelly, simply with the focused purposefulness of soldiers who have orders. One of them brings you water. You wash your face and your hands. The water is cold, which is not unusual in this tower, and it is a cold you notice with the same quality of attention you noticed the shoulder this morning. Cold water on your hands. The last time. The white shift. They have brought a white shift, a plain linen garment, the vestment of execution, which is what condemned people wear to the stake. It is not technically a woman's dress. It is a shift, a formless thing. You put it on over your men's clothing, or rather you allow them to put it on over you, because your hands are not quite steady, and this is a garment that requires someone else's help to fasten. You look down at yourself. White linen. The shift comes to mid-calf. Your feet are bare on the stone floor. You are still you. The clothes do not change that. The cell does not change that. The 5 months of examination and the 70 charges and the finding of relapse and the sentence of death, none of these things have changed what you know, which is the only thing that has ever mattered. You heard voices. They were true. You went where they told you to go. France needed you. You were there. The cell door opens. The morning light. Actual morning light, the May sun now fully above the horizon, and finding the corridor through some window you cannot see. The morning light comes through the door and falls on the stone floor of your cell in a long, pale rectangle. It is a beautiful morning. This strikes you as important, though you cannot say why. It is simply a beautiful May morning in Normandy. Clear, not cold. The kind of morning that makes even an occupied city look like a place worth being. You step into the light. The corridor is narrow. The guards are around you, not unkindly, simply present, as they have been present for 5 months, doing the work they were assigned. You walk between them down the corridor toward the staircase, and the light comes from above, and your feet are bare on the stone, and you are aware of everything with the clarity of a person who is about to lose it. The stone under your feet, the sound of your own breathing, the weight of the white shift, the cold of the morning air in the corridor, which is different from the cold of the cell, fresher, carrying something from outside, from the city, from the May morning that is happening beyond these walls without you. You walk. At the bottom of the stairs, there is a door. Beyond the door is a cart. Beyond the cart is Rouen. You pause at the door for a moment, not from fear, or not only from fear, from the specific awareness that beyond this door is the last part, the last walk, the last morning, and you want to be present for it. You want to carry it the way you have carried the other things, the voices in the garden, the wall at Compiègne, the abjuration and the men's clothing put back on. You want to carry it as yourself, fully, with your eyes open. You step through the door. The May morning takes you. Blue sky, the smell of the city, wood smoke, horses, the river not far away, the sound of a crowd that has already gathered, somewhere ahead of you, in the direction of the old market square. You are in the world again. The cart is waiting in the castle yard. It is a simple cart. Wood, 2 wheels, an open bed, no cover. This too is part of the demonstration. You are to be seen. The English want you seen. Want the people of Rouen to see a girl in a white shift on a cart, being taken through the streets to be burned, so that the image will be the one that remains. Not Orléans, not Reims. This. 2 English soldiers help you up into the cart. You are aware of their hands on your arms, and you do not pull away. There is no point in pulling away. There is only the morning and the cart and the road ahead, and you have decided, somewhere in the dark of the cell, in the hours after the voice came and said, "Do not be afraid." You have decided that you will not make this more difficult than it needs to be, not for them, for yourself. There is a kind of dignity available in this that has nothing to do with them. The cart begins to move. The streets of Rouen in the early morning. You have not seen the city properly since you arrived in December. In December you came in the dark, at the end of a journey you had not wanted to make, and the city was a darkness of shapes and the smell of the Seine and the sound of your escort's horses on the cobblestones. You have been inside the castle since then. You have been in the courtroom, which is inside the castle. You have been in the cell, which is inside the castle. Rouen has existed for you as sound. The bells, the crowds on the days when they brought you to public examination, the city's ordinary noise coming through the window slit, but not as sight. Now you see it. Rouen in 1431 is a substantial city. Timber-framed houses, 3 and 4 stories tall, lining streets that curve and narrow according to no particular plan, because they were not planned. They grew, the way medieval cities grow, following the paths of least resistance and the requirements of commerce and the accidents of property. The streets smell of animals and cooking fires, and the river which runs not far to the east. The Seine makes Rouen a trading city. Goods come up from the Channel, goods go down from Burgundy, and the city sits at the intersection and takes its percentage. The English have been here since 1419. 12 years of occupation have not erased the city's essential nature. Cities are more durable than occupations, but they have changed its mood. The city moves with a particular carefulness that occupied cities develop, a quality of people going about their business with deliberate attention to not attracting notice. You have felt this in the courtroom, in the behavior of the French clergy and legal scholars who participated in your trial. Men navigating the specific impossibility of serving two masters, the English who held power and the French who held their hearts. The people in the streets are watching. Some of them have been waiting. The English announced the execution yesterday, or perhaps the day before, you are not certain of the timing, and the announcement has drawn people from further away than this street, further away than this neighborhood. There are people standing on the upper floors of houses, leaning out of windows. There are people who have been here since before dawn to secure a position. What you see on their faces is not what you expected. You expected the faces of people watching a spectacle, the specific expression of a crowd that has gathered to see something dramatic happen, which has a quality of appetite to it, a leaning forward. You have seen this on battlefields, in the moments before an engagement, when everyone understands something is about to happen and the body cannot help but orient toward it. This is different. Some faces have that quality, but more, far more, are simply watching, not with pleasure, not with satisfaction, with something that you recognize after a moment as grief, silent grief, the grief of people who cannot say what they feel and are not certain they understand what they feel, but who know that what is happening on this cart, in this street, on this May morning is wrong. A woman near the front of the crowd is weeping openly. You look at her. She looks back. You do not say anything. There is nothing to say, and the cart is moving, and the distance between you and her is already increasing. But the looking happens, the specific moment of two people seeing each other across the impossibility of what is occurring, and it is real, and you carry it with you as the cart moves on. A priest somewhere in the crowd is saying something. You cannot hear the words, but the register is prayer, the cadence of Latin spoken rapidly, in the way people pray when they are praying against time. The cart turns. The old market square opens before you. You have known this square was coming. You have been hearing the crowd for several minutes, the sound growing as you moved through the streets, the specific low roar of a very large number of people gathered in a relatively enclosed space, but knowing it was coming and seeing it are different things. The square is full. The accounts will say later that 10,000 people were there. You cannot count 10,000 people. What you see is people everywhere you look, packed along the sides of the square, on the steps of the buildings, at every window that faces inward, on makeshift platforms that have been erected at the edges to give height. The English soldiers standing at intervals around the perimeter, red coats, disciplined lines, the machinery of occupation maintaining order over its own demonstration. And in the center of the square, 3 platforms. The platform on the left is where the judges sit, Cauchon and his assessors, the ecclesiastical authority that has condemned you, arranged in their ecclesiastical order. The platform in the center is where a priest will preach a sermon, the final theological context for what is about to happen, the church explaining itself to the crowd one last time. And the platform on the right, the tallest one, the one that rises above everything else in the square so that it can be seen from every angle, is the one with the stake. The stake is a single heavy post set in a raised plaster mound. Around the base of the mound, stacked carefully by people whose work this was, people who came here before the crowd arrived and built this thing, are bundles of wood, faggots and larger pieces, arranged in the specific way that fire requires, with gaps for air and a progression from the small kindling to the larger fuel. You look at it. You have been trying not to look at it directly since the cart entered the square, not from fear, or not only from fear, but because you have learned, in these months of the trial, that looking directly at things that frighten you before it is necessary to look at them uses a resource that you may need later. You have been looking at the crowd, at the sky, at the cobblestones, at the specific May light that is coming through the buildings at the eastern edge of the square at a low angle, turning everything gold. But now you look at it. The stake, the wood, the mound. It is real. Of course it is real. You have known it was real since the sentence was pronounced. But there is a difference between knowing something is real and seeing it in the actual morning light of an actual May day with your actual eyes, from a cart that is moving toward it. And the difference is the difference between the word and the thing. The cart stops. There is a pause, the administrative pause of a proceeding that has a structure, that requires each thing to happen in its proper order. The sermon must be preached. The charges must be read one final time. The formal handing over of the condemned from the ecclesiastical court to the secular authorities must be recorded. These things take time. You wait. You are good at waiting. Nicholas Meady climbs to the central platform and begins to preach. His text is from the first letter to the Corinthians. When one member of the body suffers, all members suffer with it. This is the standard sermon for an execution of this kind, the body of the church, the infected member, the necessity of removal for the health of the whole. You have heard this theology before, in the courtroom, in different forms. You watch the crowd while he preaches. You are looking for something, you realize. Not a specific face. You have no reason to expect anyone you know in this crowd. But you are looking at the faces in the way you have always looked at people. The way that began in Domrémy when you were learning to understand what people needed without being told, and continued through Vaucouleurs and Chinon and the campaigns, when understanding what a soldier needed before he asked for it was part of what made you effective. What you see is grief. Not all of it. Some faces are blank, the professional blankness of English soldiers who have been ordered to be here. Some faces are avid. There are always people in any crowd who are avid, but most of what you see, as you look across 10,000 people packed into the old market square of Rouen on a beautiful May morning, is grief. France is grieving. Not for you specifically, not yet, not in the full form that grief takes when it has had time to develop, but for something that this morning represents, that this cart and this stake and this girl in a white shift represents, even to people who are not certain what they believe about you, and whether the voices were real, and whether God intended all of this. Something is being lost here. They feel it. The sermon ends. The charges are read. The formal sentences are pronounced. And then someone, a soldier or a clerk you do not see clearly, ties your hands behind you. You are helped down from the cart. You are walked to the platform. You climb the steps to the stake. With each step, the square comes into fuller view. You can see the crowd in all directions now, the packed mass of people, the faces turned upward, the morning light coming in from the east and catching the windows of the houses and the armor of the soldiers and the white of your shift. You are at the top. You are at the stake. A soldier brings a tall, pointed hat made of paper, the mitre of infamy, which reads on its sides, heretic, relapsed, apostate, idolater. It is placed on your head. It is meant to humiliate. You let it be placed. The stake is behind you. You are tied to it. The ropes are firm, not cruel, firm. The person doing the tying is doing their job and doing it adequately, and this is the full extent of what you know about them. The ropes go around your body and the stake several times, and then they are knotted, and then you are attached to the stake, and the square is below you, and the morning light is on your face. You look out over the crowd. 10,000 faces. You say, Jesus. Not loudly, not as a performance, as the simplest possible statement of where you are placing yourself in this moment. Not in the square, not in Rouen, not in the politics of England and France and the 100 Years' War and the legitimacy of the Valois throne. In the keeping of the name you have been saying since your mother taught you to say it, in your father's house in Domrémy, before any of this happened. An English soldier, you will not learn his name until it appears in the accounts written long after, has made a cross from 2 sticks. He holds it up to you. You take it. You hold it against your chest. Below the platform, the fire begins. The smoke comes before the heat. This is what you notice first, not the fire itself, which is below the platform and not yet fully engaged, but the smoke, pale gray at first, then darker as the larger wood catches, rising in a column that the May morning air takes and bends slightly to the northeast. Wood smoke. You have smelled wood smoke your entire life. In Domrémy, in every house you entered on the campaign, in the encampments where the cooking fires burned through the night. You know this smell as well as you know any smell. It is simply wood smoke. The heat comes next. It arrives as a quality of the air around your feet before you feel it on your skin, a rising warmth, different from the warmth of the morning sun, which comes from above and lands on the surface of things. This warmth comes from below and moves upward, and it has a pressure to it that sunlight does not have. You do not look down. You look out. The square is very quiet. This surprises you. 10,000 people, and the square is quiet, not silent. There are sounds, individual sounds, the cry of a child somewhere in the crowd, a man's voice saying something in French that you cannot resolve into words, the crackle of the fire below you which is audible now, the specific voice of burning wood, but the crowd as a whole is quiet. The roar you heard from the cart as you approached has subsided into something much stiller. They are watching. You look at them. The faces you can see from here, the ones in the front rows, the ones closest to the platform, are the clearest. A woman with a child on her hip. The child's face turned into the woman's shoulder because the woman has turned her away. An old man with his hat removed, held against his chest, the way you hold your hat at a funeral. A younger man, perhaps 20, with a face that is working very hard to contain something. The specific tension of a face that is fighting the body's impulse to make sound. Grief. The same grief you saw from the cart. Here, closer, it is more legible. You think, they know. Not about the voices. Most of them will never know what you know about the voices, and it does not matter. They know what is happening here in the sense that matters. A young woman who did something extraordinary is being killed by the people who were threatened by what she did. They know this the way people always know this, even when they cannot say it clearly, even when the official explanation is heresy and idolatry and men's clothing. They know. The heat is increasing. You are aware of it in your feet now, and rising. The white shift will catch before the ropes do. Linen burns quickly, which is something you know from the practical knowledge of a farming village where linen was part of the ordinary work of life, where you have seen what happens when cloth gets too close to a fire. You hold the cross. The cross the English soldier made from 2 sticks. He handed it up to you with the specific expression of a man doing something that is outside his orders but within his conscience, and you took it because it was given in that spirit, and you receive things given in that spirit. It is a rough thing. 2 sticks lashed together with a piece of cord or cloth. You cannot see what holds them. What holds them does not matter. You hold it. You say the name you have been saying since your mother taught it to you. Jesus. Not loudly, quietly, repeatedly, not as a performance for the crowd. The crowd cannot hear you over the sound of the fire, which is growing now, the crackle becoming a roar as the larger wood catches, and the air currents that fire creates begin to pull at the smoke and the flames. You are saying it because it is the truest thing you know how to say, and this is the moment for the truest things. Jesus. The heat is on your legs now. You do not look down. You look at the sky. The sky above the old market square of Rouen on the 30th of May, 1431, is the blue of a clear May morning, the specific blue of the sky after a night of no clouds, a blue that has a depth to it in the early hours before the atmospheric haze of midday flattens it. You have looked at this sky, or skies like it, for 19 years. In Domrémy it was this sky, over the fields and the river. On the campaign it was this sky, over the towns and the roads and the besieged walls. In the cell it was visible, when there was any visibility at all, as a small, irregular patch of this sky through the window slit. It is a good sky. You think this, holding the cross, in the smoke and the heat. It is a good sky. The witnesses will write about this afterward, the ones who write about it at all. Most will not write about it. The English authorities do not encourage documentation of what they will later wish had been handled differently. But some will write, in letters, in private records, in the testimonies taken 25 years later when the rehabilitation trial assembles the surviving witnesses to reconstruct what happened. Jeanne, the court usher who accompanied you from the castle to the square, will write that you showed remarkable courage and that you died calling on God. Isambart de la Pierre will write that your last word was Jesus. Martin l'Advenu, The friar who heard your final confession will write that he wept. Richard Beauchamp, Earl of Warwick, the English commander who had administrative responsibility for the execution, will say nothing in writing, but a man who was present will report that Beauchamp said, after it was over, "We are all ruined. We have burned a saint." Whether he said this, you do not know. You will not be there when he says it. What you are there for is this: the sky and the smoke and the cross and the name you say into the noise of the fire and the crowd and the morning. The voices came last night. Saint Catherine said, "Do not be afraid of what you must suffer. You will come to the kingdom of paradise." You believed this then. You believe it now. This is not the belief of a person who has never doubted. You have doubted in this cell, in this courtroom, in the cemetery of Saint Ouen when you signed the abjuration that you later took back. Doubt is not the opposite of faith. Doubt is the texture of faith for a person who is paying attention. You have been paying attention for 19 years, and the doubt has been there, and the faith has been there, and they have coexisted in you the way most real things coexist, not in resolution, but in the daily practice of continuing. You have continued until now. The fire is very loud. The heat is everywhere. You hold the cross. You look at the sky. Jesus, Jeanne de Metz, who gave you your first escort from Vaucouleurs to Chinon, is not in this square. You do not know where he is, somewhere in France, doing whatever soldiers do when the mission that gave their life a particular shape has ended. You hope he is well. You hope he remembers the ride from Vaucouleurs to Chinon in February 1429 with the same quality you remember it, cold and dark and terrifying and alive in a way that most things are not alive, the sense of moving toward something that mattered. Pierre, your brother, is not in this square. You have been hoping since the morning that he is not in Rouen at all, that he went back to Domrémy when the news came, or that someone had the sense to take him somewhere he did not have to see this. Your mother is not here. Your mother is in Domrémy or somewhere near it, in the Duchy of Bar on the eastern border of France, and she will hear about this. The news will reach her through the chain of telling that connects everything eventually, and she will grieve in the way she grieves, which you expect is privately and practically, because that is who she is. You would like her to know that you were not alone at the end. Isambard stayed near the platform for as long as he was permitted. You saw him below in the crowd that had formed around the base of the platform. His face turned upward. He prayed. You could see his lips moving. You were glad of it. The square, the sky, the cross, the name. This is what it comes down to at the end of everything. Not the campaigns or the courtroom or the 70 charges or the abjuration or the men's clothing. The simplest possible things. The sky above you and the name in your mouth and the cross in your hands and the knowledge which has never left you. That what you did was what you were told to do and that being told was real. The fire has been burning for some time now. The smoke is very thick. You say the name one more time, and then you are somewhere else. The square is still full. The smoke column is rising straight up now, the morning air having stilled, and the 10,000 people who came to see what the English wanted them to see are standing in a silence that is heavier than any silence that gathered in the courtroom during 5 months of examination. They are not making the sound of people who have seen what they expected to see. They are making the sound of people who have seen something they did not expect and do not know yet how to hold. Richard Beauchamp's secretary is writing something. The court clerk is closing his book. The soldiers at the perimeter are looking at each other. And in the crowd, this is in the record, this is what the witnesses will say 25 years later in the rehabilitation testimony. In the crowd, people are weeping. Not some people, most people. The kind of weeping that is not performance and not grief for a person they knew personally, but something older and less specific. The kind of weeping that happens when a thing has been done that cannot be undone, and everyone in the square knows it, and there is nothing to do now but stand in the smoke and the May morning and know it together. A secretary to Cardinal Winchester will write in a letter that he feared England's soul was in danger for what was done here today. He will write this privately, carefully, with the handwriting of a man who knows letters can be intercepted. The fire burns down. The wood that was stacked with such care by the people whose work that was, it does the work it was built to do. The smoke shifts as the morning air moves. The crowd begins, slowly, to disperse. The English soldiers collect what the fire has not consumed and throw it into the Seine, as they have been ordered to do, so that nothing remains to become a relic. This does not work the way they intend. The heart does not burn. The man responsible for the burning will report this to Cauchon afterward. He will say, "We raked back the coals and found her heart intact, and we could not make it burn." Cauchon will order it thrown into the river with everything else. Whether this is literally true is not a question you are in a position to answer. What is true is that it is reported. What is true is that it is remembered. What is true is that a story about a heart that would not burn, attached to a girl from Domrémy who led armies and crowned kings, and stood in the smoke of the old market square calling on Jesus until the last moment, turns out to be very difficult to extinguish. The river receives what the executioner gives it. The square empties. The smoke disperses in the May air. Pierre Cauchon leaves the square before the fire is fully out. He does not look back. This is noted by the people around him. The fact of not looking back. The specific decisiveness of a man who has decided that what he has done is done, and that looking at it further serves no purpose. He has a great deal of administrative work to complete. There are records to file. The ecclesiastical proceedings must be formally closed. The rehabilitation of the trial's findings, should anyone attempt it in the future, must be made as difficult as possible through meticulous documentation of the process. He is good at documentation. He will live for 13 more years. He will be Bishop of Lisieux, then of Bayeux. He will receive benefits and preferments from the English, which were partly the point. He will conduct the remainder of his career with the same methodical competence he brought to this trial. Whether he ever thinks about this morning, whether the smoke of the old market square enters the room at night, whether the sound of the crowd's silence stays with him, this is not in the record. Records do not hold that kind of thing. Martin Ladvenu, who heard your final confession, will leave Rouen before the year is out. He will spend the rest of his life unable to speak about this morning without weeping. This is in the record, multiple accounts of him breaking down when asked about it. at intervals of years and decades, as though the morning lives in him at a depth that time does not reach. Jean, the court usher who walked with you from the castle, will give his testimony at the rehabilitation trial in 1456 with the specificity of a man who has been keeping the account in his mind for 25 years, checking it against itself, making sure it stays accurate. He will describe how you were silent in the cart on the way to the square. He will describe how you called out to the saints whose voices you had heard since you were 13. He will describe how you asked for a cross to be held before you, and how a sympathetic English soldier made one from 2 sticks, and how you took it and pressed it to your chest. He will describe the silence of the crowd. He will describe how several of the English soldiers who witnessed the execution stated afterward that they were afraid for their souls. The rehabilitation trial begins in 1450, when Charles VII, the king you crowned in Reims in 1429, the king for whom you did all of it, the king who did not ransom you and did not intervene in the trial and let the English burn you in his name, commissions a preliminary investigation. It takes 6 years. In 1456, the ecclesiastical tribunal declares the trial of 1431 null and void. All charges erased, your memory formally rehabilitated. Your mother, Isabelle Romay, is alive for this verdict. She petitioned for the rehabilitation herself. This is in the record. She traveled to Paris, to Rome, to wherever she needed to go, with the persistence of a woman who has been told her daughter was a heretic and knows this to be false, and who will not stop moving until the record says otherwise. She is old by 1456. She has been old for a long time, in the way that grief makes people old, but she is there for the verdict. You would be glad of this. The morning continues over Rouen. The scene moves. The English soldiers at the perimeter of the old market square receive their dismissal and return to their other duties. The city resumes the ordinary work of an occupied city on a Thursday morning in May. The markets that were closed for the execution reopen. The streets fill again with people going somewhere with a purpose. The old market square is swept. The platform where the stake stood is dismantled. The square becomes a square again, a public space, a market space, the ordinary geometry of a medieval city's commercial center. In a few years, the English will be gone and the square will be French again, and people will go about their business in it without thinking about what happened here on this particular morning. But not entirely without thinking about it. There is a quality that places acquire from the things that happen in them, not supernaturally, not in any way that requires explanation beyond the ordinary, simply the way memory accumulates in shared space. People will walk through this square for generations knowing what happened here, and that knowing will be part of what the square is, underneath its market days and its ordinary comings and goings. Jeanne d'Arc was burned here. This is what they will know. This and the other things, the voices, the campaigns, the king in Reims, the banner at Orléans, the whole story which moves through the population of France in the years after 1431 with the particular velocity of stories that people need. France needs this story. France is still at war in 1431. The war will not end until 1453, 22 years from now. In those 22 years, France will turn what was almost a defeat into a victory. Not because of you, not directly, not because your death gave them some mystical strength, but because the story of what you did and what was done to you is one of the things that makes France understand itself as France, what it is worth fighting for, what it means to be a country. This is larger than you intended. You intended to free Orléans and crown the king. You did both. What grew from those specific acts, what your life and your death became in the telling, in the years and centuries of telling that follow. This is not something you could have planned or controlled. It is simply what happens when a true thing is done in the right moment by the right person. The true thing was done. The moment was right. You were the person. Rouen goes on. France goes on. The May morning opens fully now. The sun is higher, the early morning shadows retreating as the light comes more directly from the east. The Seine glitters. The Cathedral of Rouen, which has stood here since before the English came, and will stand here long after they are gone, is doing what cathedrals do, rising above the city with the patient permanence of stone built to outlast every specific thing that happens at its feet. The bells will ring at noon. They always ring at noon. They rang at noon the morning you were led into your first examination in January. They rang at noon on the day you signed the abjuration in May. They rang at noon yesterday, while you were lying in the cell knowing what the next morning would be. They will ring at noon today. The city does not pause for what has happened. The city keeps its hours. And somewhere in the keeping of hours, in the ordinary continuing of a city and a country and a world that does not stop for any individual ending, somewhere in that continuation, the thing you did is already becoming what it will become. Jeanne, the voices were real. You went. The rest is what the living do with the true things the dead have left them. The year is 1456. 25 years have passed since the morning in the old market square. The city of Rouen is French again. The English left in 1449 after 30 years of occupation as part of the collapse of English power in Normandy that marked the final phase of the 100 Years' War. The war itself ended in 1453 at the Battle of Castillon, which is not a battle most people remember. It is a battle that ended 116 years of war, which is a strange thing to end quietly, but endings are often quieter than the things they end. France is France again. The Rehabilitation Tribunal meets in the palace of the Archbishop of Rouen, a different palace from the castle where the trial of 1431 was held, but close enough that the people who attend can, if they choose, walk the distance that Jeanne walked on the morning of the 30th of May. Some of them do. The older ones, the ones who were there, do not need to walk it. They have been walking it in their minds for 25 years. Isambert de la Pierre gives his testimony. He is in his 60s now. He speaks with the careful precision of a man who has been keeping his account accurate, checking it against itself for a very long time. He describes the morning in detail, the cell, the communion, the white shift, the cart through the streets, the square, the stake, the cross that the English soldier made from 2 sticks and handed up. He says, she called on Jesus until the last moment. He says, several English soldiers wept. He says, I have never stopped weeping when I think of it, and I have thought of it every day since. The tribunal writes this down. Jean Monsieur testifies. Guillaume Manchon, the chief notary of the trial, testifies. The man who wrote down your words in the courtroom, who preserved the record of the examination with a care that he will later say was the most important work of his life, even though he understood at the time that the record was being created to justify what had already been decided. He kept it true anyway. This is also in the record. The witnesses are old. Some of the witnesses are dead. Their testimony is read into the record by people who knew them. Your mother is there. Isabelle Romay is in her 70s. She has been petitioning for this tribunal since 1450, walking to Paris, writing letters, making the case in every venue available to her that her daughter was not a heretic. She has been doing this for 6 years. She is the reason this tribunal exists more than any other single person. Charles VII commissioned the investigation, but Isabelle Romay demanded it, in the specific way that a mother demands things when she knows something about her child that the world has gotten wrong. She does not testify in formal terms. She is there. She is present in the room. On the 7th of July, 1456, the tribunal delivers its verdict. The trial of 1431 is declared null and void. All charges are erased from the record. Jeanne d'Arc is declared innocent of all the charges brought against her. Isabelle Romay hears this in the room where the verdict is delivered. She is alive for this. You would be glad of this. In Domrémy, the village where you were born, things have also changed. The house where you grew up, your father's house, the house with more than one room, the house where your mother taught you the Ave Maria and the Pater Noster and the Credo, that house still stands. It will stand for a very long time. People come to see it. They come from the surrounding villages first, then from further away, then from places you never went to and never knew. They come to see the house and the church and the field where the voices first came. Your family's taxes are remitted. The village of Domrémy is exempted from taxation for the rest of its history as a village, a royal gesture, the kind of practical acknowledgement that kingdoms make when they cannot otherwise compensate for what was done in their name. The exemption lasts until the French Revolution, 350 years after the morning in the old market square. The church in Domrémy is the Church of Saint Remy, the one you went to more often than other children, where you knelt longer, where you prayed with the focus that your neighbors would remember when they were asked. The church is still there, the bell that rang the Angelus on summer afternoons in the years when you were learning to hear the voices. That bell's successor rings the same hours over the same village in the same valley, and the sound of it crosses the same fields that your father's cattle grazed in the mornings of your childhood. The garden where the voices first came. The garden is gone now. The specific garden, the specific arrangement of plants and paths that existed in the summer of 1425. Gardens change, seasons change them, and people change them, and the specific morning of a specific 13-year-old in a specific shaft of noon light is not the kind of thing that can be preserved in soil. But the place is there. The valley is there, the river that ran near the village, the Meuse which you crossed on your way out of Domrémy and did not cross again. The Meuse is still there, doing what rivers do, moving steadily in the direction gravity requires. You think about the garden. Not analytically, you are past the place where the garden is an object of analysis. Simply, you think about it, the noon sun, the heat on the back of your neck, the way you were moving toward the house and then you were not moving because something came from the direction of the church that stopped you, the brightness, the warmth that was not the warmth of summer, the voice that said your name. You were afraid, but you did not run. This is what you would want people to know, if the wanting could carry across the distance between the morning of the 30th of May, 1431, and any morning that comes after it. Not the battles, not the banner at Orléans or the light in the cathedral at Reims, not the trial, not the courtroom, not the 70 charges reduced to 12. This, that you were afraid and you did not run, that the voices were real, and you went where they told you to go, and you did what they told you to do, and France was different because of it, not transformed, not saved in any clean final sense, but different, turned, moved in a direction that it might not have moved without you. That a girl from a village on the eastern border of a country that was losing heard something in a garden one summer morning, and believed it and acted on it, and did not stop acting on it until they tied her to a stake. That the believing was real, that the acting was real. These things are in the record that Guillaume Manchon kept honestly, and that the Rehabilitation Tribunal of 1456 examined carefully, and that the centuries have not erased, because true things are more durable than the power of the people who try to erase them. The voices said, "Do not be afraid." You were afraid. You went anyway. This is the whole of the story, finally, when you remove everything that is not essential. A voice in a garden, a girl who listened, a country that needed turning, the specific courage of a person who knows she is afraid and goes forward in spite of it, not because the fear is gone, but because what she has been told is more true than the fear is large. The May morning in Domrémy, where all of it began, is a long way from the May morning in Rouen, where all of it ended. But they are the same morning, in the way that all the mornings of a life are the same morning, continuous, connected, each one following from the one before in the single long thread of days that constitutes a life lived in a particular direction. Your direction was forward. It was always forward. The valley of Domrémy is quiet now, in the way of evenings in early May, the particular quiet of a river valley at the end of a day, when the work is done and the light is long and the air has cooled enough that it carries the smell of the river and the fields and the last warmth of the day rising from the earth. The church bell rings. The cattle are in. The river moves. The sky above the valley goes slowly from blue to the deep blue that comes before dark, the same color it was over the old market square of Rouen in the last moments of the morning, the color that is not yet night but is no longer entirely day. Your mother's voice from the house. The prayers she taught you, the Ave Maria, the Pater Noster, the Credo, coming through the open door of the house in Domrémy, in the evening, in the summer, in the year before everything changed. Hail Mary, full of grace. The Lord is with thee. The valley quiets. The river moves. The light goes slowly from the sky. The voices are still. Not silent, still, the way still water is not empty but simply at rest, holding everything that moves beneath it without disturbance. The years after 1456 are long. Domrémy does not become famous immediately. The village continues to be what it has always been, a small farming community on the eastern border of France, in the valley of the Meuse, going about the work that farming villages have always done. The cattle, the fields, the church of Saint Remy, with its bell marking the hours. But the story moves. Stories move differently from armies. An army requires roads and supply lines and favorable weather and the cooperation of geography. A story requires only mouths. The story of Jeanne d'Arc, the girl from Domrémy, the voices, Orléans, Reims, the trial, the fire. This story moves through France in the years after the rehabilitation, with the particular velocity of a story that people have been waiting to be allowed to tell. Because they were not, during the English occupation, quite allowed to tell it. The English controlled the official record for 2 decades after the burning. They controlled what was said in the courts and the churches and the administrative documents of occupied Normandy. But they did not control what was said in kitchens and on roads and in the fields where people worked within earshot of each other. The unofficial story, the one that circulated in whispers during the occupation, the one that passed from person to person through the chain of telling, that story survived. It was there, underneath the official account, waiting for the moment when the official account would change. The verdict of 1456 was that moment. After 1456, the story could be told openly. It was told. It grew in the telling, as all true stories grow, not falsified, but amplified, the essential truths becoming clearer in each retelling as the incidental details fall away. The essential truths are these. She was from Domrémy. She heard voices. She went. She saved France. She was burned. And she was not wrong. These truths are durable. In 1909, 478 years after the morning in the old market square, Pope Pius X beatifies Jeanne d'Arc. This is the first formal step towards sainthood in the Catholic Church, the declaration that a specific person lived a life of heroic virtue and is in heaven. The ceremony takes place in Rome, in a basilica, with the ceremony and weight that the Church brings to its most solemn occasions. In 1920, Pope Benedict XV canonizes her. She is declared a saint. The girl from Domrémy who could not read, who tended cattle and spun wool and prayed longer than the other children, who heard voices in a garden at noon and believed them and went where they told her to go, she is declared a saint of the Roman Catholic Church. Your mother taught you the Ave Maria, the Pater Noster, the Credo. You said them in the cell, in the dark, on the last night. You said the name into the fire on the last morning. The Church eventually says, yes, we believe you. The old market square of Rouen, the square where you stood on the 30th of May, 1431, is still a square. It is called the Place du Vieux Marché now, the place of the old market. It is in the center of Rouen, which is still a substantial city, which is still on the Seine. The timber-framed houses of the medieval city mostly burned in the Second World War, when Rouen was bombed repeatedly, but the square survived. The square and the church that stands in it, Sainte Jeanne d'Arc, built in the 20th century, shaped like an inverted ship's hull, and the stone cross that marks the spot where the stake stood. People visit. They come from France and from everywhere else. They come to stand in the square where the thing happened, because human beings go to places where things happened, in the specific hope that being in the place will give them something that reading about the place cannot give. Sometimes it does. Sometimes you stand in a square in Rouen on a May morning, and the light comes through the gap between the buildings at the angle of an early morning sun, and you feel not what she felt. You cannot feel that, but the adjacency of it. The fact that this is the same air, the same square, the same direction of morning light. This is what remains. The voices were real. The going was real. The fire was real. And the heart that would not burn, whether literal or not, whether that exact account is exactly true or is the kind of truth that gathers around the true things and makes them legible, the heart that would not burn is real in the only sense that matters. It is still burning. It will burn for a very long time. The valley of Domrémy quiets now. The river moves. The light is almost gone from the sky. The stars appear above the hills to the east, the steady light of things that were there before any of this and will be there after, indifferent and constant and enormous. The bell of the church of Saint Remy rings the evening hour. Your mother's voice from the house. Hail Mary, full of grace. The Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. The prayer your mother taught you. The prayer you said in the dark of the cell. The prayer you said into the fire. The valley breathes. The night comes gently, the way May nights come in Lorraine, slowly, the light giving way by degrees until the dark is full and the stars are clear above the hills and the river is a sound rather than a sight and the village is quiet. You were Jeanne. You were born in Domrémy in the year 1412. You heard voices in a garden one summer morning when you were 13 years old. You went where they told you to go. You were not wrong. Rest now. The valley is quiet. The river is there. The stars are there. Sleep now. Thank you for spending this time with Quiet History at Bedtime. If Jane's story stayed with you, a like or a subscribe means more than you know. It helps this channel find the people who need it. Turn on notifications if you'd like to know when the next story is ready. Good night.